All right, so we'll dive in here to chat about stress and anxiety. So I know this is thrilling stuff here, but I just want to give you a quick information about who I am. I'm Taryn Rain. I'm the founder of the Remote Yogi, which is an online wellness and spiritual center, all online. So we do yoga, meditation, coaching, whether group coaching or one-on-one. And the reason I'm here to chat about stress and anxiety today is because this is so much of my own personal story. So I'll stop screen sharing for just a second so you guys can see me again. But, anxiety had a big hold on me and my life for a long time. So I started dealing with stress and anxiety probably around the age of 11 or 12. Although I can remember my earliest moment of like stress being at like 3 years old, which is really unusual. But I've been dealing with stress and anxiety since I was really young and was put on a lot of antidepressant medications and kind of went through this whirlwind of self-medicating with drugs and alcohol through high school and into college. And then I started medicating with workaholism. And just through all of it, I was chasing after perfectionism because my anxiety had really told me that if I wasn't perfect, if I wasn't, ahead of things, then I was going to fail at life or something. I had some kind of dramatic story in my head that if I wasn't what everyone expected me to do, that bad things were going to happen, and thus this kind of created this storm of anxiety where I kind of chased after what I thought I was supposed to be doing most of my life. Got married young, got the corporate job, got the house, and was still finding myself having panic attacks on the floor in my shower, unable to breathe, like worried about how I was going to get myself out and moving again. And I just decided at one point enough was enough. I dove deeper into my yoga practice, began teaching, began moving into meditation and breath work. And a lot of the tools I'm going to share with you today ultimately found my way to my own coaches, and on we go into the space that I'm in now. But it really took me hitting this bottom where I was just exhausted with panic attacks every day that I decided it was time to move on. And my goal is to help you guys get to a place where before you're having daily panic attacks, you guys can realize the ways stress and anxiety are triggering things in your life and maybe make steps to adjust and change. Ashley, I haven't received the questions from the team. Courtney was traveling today, so with the chaos of being a traveler myself, I know how chaotic that can be, but I don't have the questions, so please feel free to type them in here as well. That would be awesome. Okay, let's dive into this presentation then, but throughout, if you guys have any questions about anything happening on the screen, let me know. And then I'm also going live on Instagram after this if you guys want to chat more. Okay, so let me dive back in here. You'll have to be patient with me. I'm new to Google Hangouts. I do most of my stuff on Zoom. Okay, awesome. And so there I am, the remote yogi, if you're wanting to join me on the Instagram live after this. So for me, the biggest thing about stress and anxiety is really allowing yourself to understand it. And so for me, it was not only understanding the emotions, understanding what was happening to me mentally and physically, but also having an understanding what's happening in my brain and what mechanisms are causing it, because it gave me a lot more control once I could understand that. So we're going to dive into a little bit of the science behind stress and anxiety, and also why you don't need to feel like you're a failure because you have it. So the biggest thing with stress is it's kind of a constant in our life, and that's for good reason. So stress was brought about to train ourselves to make sure we're surviving. So this is an older part of the brain that was created at the times when we were living in cave societies or, hunting societies, hunting and gathering. And so we had to have a little bit of stress in our life when we were low on food or when there was some kind of fear happening that would propel us to move forward to get the things that we need to survive. The problem is We now live in a society where there is constant stress triggers. Um, and we're not really getting to a state whereas before we would go, okay, we're running low on food, let's go get the food. Great, the stress is gone. Now there's one stress after another, whether it's paying the mortgage and having an interview with your boss and having the kids get to soccer practice on time, and whatever it is, there's this kind of constant stress that we've convinced ourselves is life or death because it's the exact same part of the brain that would be triggering these fear responses to help us survive in these old times. It's also nicknamed the silent killer because in the US, they estimate that between 70 and 90% of all doctor's visits are actually stress related. Because here's what's happening when we're stressed out, especially when it's constantly. Complicated things are happening in the brain, and I'm no scientist, but the basic thing to remember here is we're releasing cortisol in the body, which is the stress hormone. Again, it's that part that's saying, hey, we're in stress mode, let's do something about it. But when it's constantly flowing through our body, there's too much of it and we're not releasing it. What ends up happening is we start to have a lot of heart problems from our heart rate getting too high, too fast, and not slowing back down, causes blood clots. There's also a major problem with shortness of breath. So, oftentimes, when I chat with people who are having panic attacks, it kind of comes on out of nowhere. So, we get to a point where we're hyperventilating, we don't know why, we're not actually having a very stressful or anxious day. What happens is over time, when we're releasing cortisol, we're shortening our breath a little bit here, a little bit there, and over years and years of time, we're shortening our breath to the point of panic attacks because we're not getting full breaths. And it's just something that happens over time when we don't slow down and notice it and do something about it. The other big thing here is weight gain or weight loss. And this really just depends on your own body's response to stress. I start dropping weight like crazy when I'm stressed out, but oftentimes people gain weight because what happens is, again, we're going back to those old times, hunter gatherer society. When we're releasing cortisol in the body, we're thinking that winter's coming, we've got to store any kind of food we can. So we start to store fat. Um, so oftentimes when I'm working with clients who are on a diet or are, being really strict about their food regimen and their fitness and everything else, they end up putting on weight and they're really confused. And the problem here is when it's the point of stressing you out. When the diet is stressing you out, it's actually going to cause you to store whatever fat you're eating instead of go through the weight loss. So that might be helpful to some of you who have struggled with dieting. And then we get into anxiety. So, super similar reaction, still that old school part of the brain that's being triggered because it's trying to understand, um, what's happening, what kind of stressor do we need to attack here. So, it's triggering the amygdala, which is a really common word nowadays. Most people know a little bit about the amygdala because the science behind it and its relation to anxiety is huge. So this is that fight or flight part of the brain. So when anxiety is triggering in the body, it's going to like light up the amygdala like crazy, which has the body responding in a way that's either going to flee or kind of curl in and cover the organs, or we're going to get really tense, shoulders are up, and we're going into this like fighter mode. So again, it causes a physical reaction on the body. So oftentimes people think about stress and anxiety being purely mental or emotional, but what's happening is it's causing a physical reaction through the release of cortisol and through the stimulation of the amygdala. So we're either hunching over, so we're kind of protecting our heart space. So we've got the rounded shoulders, we're all kind of hunched, like hunchbacks a little bit, just kind of rounded forward. Or the opposite issue where we keep the shoulders really high up by the ears, everything's really tense. A lot of people carry stress in their shoulders, and that's from kind of being in this fight mode. So, another thing I want to just touch on briefly here is understanding the difference between worry and anxiety, because sometimes we're only experiencing worry, which is actually something that can dissolve much easier. Worry is purely thought based. So with anxiety, we're talking about how it gets into the body, how we're like triggering all these different reactions. With a worry, it's just going to stay up in the head, and we can work our way back out of it through just using the head. So if you are worried about a meeting with your boss and it's kind of out of the blue, you're going to start worrying about all the possibilities of what might take place during that interview or during that meeting. And so you've got all these different worries, and it can kind of spiral a little bit, but for the most part, it stays in the brain. When it turns to anxiety, it spirals in the brain. It usually spirals a bit beyond that, where we start thinking, I don't know what we're having this meeting about. I should have never applied for this job. I'm clearly not cut out for it. I'm a loser. No one likes me. And we kind of start to trigger down into these like deeper rooted beliefs. Um, and we start to have that physical reaction. So the response in the body, again, might be those tight shoulders, might be kind of a rounding forward, shortness of breath, a tightness in the body. We often clench either our chests or our stomachs or both. Upset stomach, a lot of gut issues are actually caused by us constantly kind of squeezing into the stomach through stress and anxiety, just causing a lot of worry to take place here in the body. So it can almost feel like you're getting physically ill, like you might be upset, or you might even get headaches. And again, with anxiety, the things that I dive deeper into with a lot of my clients is a lot of it is based in old fears and false beliefs, or old trauma. So let's just take the example of like hosting friends for dinner. If you're hosting friends for dinner, you've got all these plans, you've got things put out, you get home and you start, chopping up the veggies, and you realize, oh my gosh, my house is a mess. How am I going to get everything done? And you start to get a little bit anxious about getting the house clean and getting everything prepped. And now you realize that you need a shower because you're going to smell bad from all the cleaning. And it kind of starts to spiral into this anxiety. When it's anxiety, there's a deeper rooted issue. So when we slow down and we're like, okay, why am I stressing out about this? Maybe I'm worried my friends aren't going to like me if my place isn't perfect. Maybe I'm worried that I'm not going to impress them. Maybe I'm worried I'm not going to belong. Maybe I've always had a fear of belonging, right? We can dig deeper into these traumas or false beliefs that we've created, usually through childhood and early adulthood. But we've got to be able to slow down in order to see that. And so we'll dive into some of my practices for that as we move on. And Ashley, I did see your question about the panic attack. I'm definitely going to get to that. That's used to be one of my biggest issues. And so we'll walk through some of my big things here for how I get rid of it. So before we dive into all of the things that you can do to help with your stress and anxiety, I want to remind all of you that you're not broken. There's nothing like wrong with your brain or wrong with you because you're dealing with stress and anxiety, especially anxiety. We're living in a culture now, we're living in a lifestyle that has us constantly triggered. And so it's not really our fault. It's like our brain's doing what it's supposed to do. I always remind people that, you know, the reason that we're here is because our ancestors were the more anxious ones, right? So if you had like Bob and Fred, and Bob wanted to go down this cave, and Fred was like, no, man, I don't think we should go down the cave because there's probably a lion at the end of it. And the first guy goes anyway. Your ancestor is the one who was a little too anxious about the fact that there might be a lion, and he's the one who survived because he had that anxiety, right? So understanding that the anxiety is there for a reason, and if you have it, it's because it was meant for a purpose at one point in time. And for me, it still serves purposes, and we can dive into that in a little bit as well. So understanding that we're in a working culture, especially in Western societies, and I know this is global, so I'm not sure of everyone's circumstances, but a lot of us have high demands. We're in like highly lit office spaces. There's a lot of like competition and aggression, and it kind of keeps you on this heightened sense of kind of always got to look over your back kind of situation, which is going to cause you to feel stressed and anxious. The other big thing here is our media. So, as much as we might think that watching violent movies or watching the news doesn't really affect us because we know it's a movie, the amygdala is not that smart. And if you're watching something on TV, say a fight scene or a war scene, the amygdala doesn't know the difference between it being a TV show or a movie and it being real life. So it's going to be triggering the same kind of anxiety responses, same kind of fear responses as if it was happening in real life. So you're dealing with the shortness of breath, the heart racing up, the body kind of reacting as it would normally. So a lot of us spend a lot of time watching violent TV shows and movies because that's what's popular. But just know that if you're already an anxious person, that might not be the best option, or to approach those movies with some of the suggestions that I have in the rest of the slides on how to like breathe your way through it and keep yourself in a calm state. Um, my biggest issue, and I'm not sure if anyone here can relate to it, is I get the most anxious when I have too many choices. And this is a major thing. It's called decision fatigue, when there's too many options and we're really worried about making the right choice. For me, that's one of my biggest anxieties, is making sure I make the right choice the first time. And I don't know what it is that has me so stressed out about it, but it's a big thing for me. So I can have a near panic attack over too many options of hummus at the grocery store, no joke, because it just feels so overwhelming to me. And nowadays, we live in a place in a society where there's unlimited choice everywhere, whether it's your hummus choices or your career or where you're going to live or what kind of car you want, all these different things. There's too many options and it can feel really overwhelming. And that's a quick way to get into an anxiety attack. So, one of the things that I do with feeling like there's too many choices is sometimes I'll just ask friends to help me narrow them down. Or, if a friend asks me to go for dinner and asks where I would like to go, I always say, hey, can you give me 3 options? Or, hey, can you give me a couple choices? Because I know that that's going to help my anxiety to not freak out when I have a narrowed list. And so you can join friends in on this mission. Let your friends know, hey, the best way you can support me sometimes is simply by helping me narrow down my Airbnb choices so I don't have a panic attack over choosing the right hot tub or whatever it is. Okay. The last thing here is a change of lifestyle. For those of you who are dealing with high stress and anxiety, these 3 things on the bottom are one of the biggest takeaways I want you to have as far as long-term changes. We'll get into like the quick things that you can do to work your way through it, but these 3 are huge. So making sure you're getting enough sleep. 8 hours of sleep is really ideal. And I know everyone feels like they're way too busy to slow down and sleep. But here's the thing. You're also too busy to be having panic attacks. You're also too busy to be having heart problems, respiratory issues, because you're allowing this stress and anxiety to take over your life, right? You're going to get to the point of burnout where you're sick, where you're not able to do all the things that you're trying to do now. So I highly encourage you to find the time to make sleep a priority now. This is the number one thing you can do for your health, above working out, above diet. And I'm saying this as a wellness coach. Sleep is number one, okay? The other thing here is making sure you're getting sunlight. So there's this great study where they took a bunch of hospital patients after surgery and they put some of the patients in sunlit rooms and the other patients in rooms without windows. Nothing else was different. They found that the people who were moved into the well lit rooms had higher pain tolerances than the ones who were in the darker rooms. That shows us that when we're in the sun, when we're able to catch the sun's energy, it's going to increase our pain tolerance. And stress and anxiety are a form of pain, whether it's mental pain, emotional pain, or physical pain, they're still responding in the body as pain. So when we get around more sunlight, we're able to increase our ability to deal with that and cope and let it kind of brush off our backs a little bit easier. The last thing here is diet. And I'm not going to get into like all the craziness when it comes to diet. If you want to chat with me about it afterwards, we can. My biggest suggestions, if you are an anxious person, is to just really watch your sugar intake. So, especially white sugar is highly correlated to higher levels of anxiety. I went through a complete detox where I cut it out for a couple months and my anxiety cut in half. It was the only change I made. It was extremely significant in how I felt every day. But this can also mean fructose, like normal sugars that are found in fruit and things. Just make sure you're being watchful of having too much sugar. Also, having too much caffeine, alcohol, and processed foods. So those are my only tips with diet. We can dive in more if you guys would like, but that is kind of the big ones to look out for if you're already dealing with a lot of anxiety or just for health in general. This is one of my favorite quotes by Thich Nhat Hanh, and if you're into understanding mindfulness and some of the other tools I give you in this presentation, his books are phenomenal. He says, people have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. So again, I see this oftentimes with my clients I'm working with one-on-one, where they know that they don't like the stress and anxiety. They know that that's not fun, but making the changes in their lives to help alleviate stress and anxiety seems scarier than just keeping the stress and anxiety, which is the brain just holding on to what's familiar. And so again, know that it's not you having something wrong with you, it's how the brain is kind of designed. But we can kind of work our way through that by just taking little steps and making small changes that I'll suggest in the coming slides. Cool. So now we understand it. If anyone has any questions so far on just kind of understanding the mechanisms, what's happening in the brain, what's happening in the body, let me know. We're going to move forward now into discussing some of the steps that we can take to alleviate stress and anxiety in our lives, whether big steps or little steps. So these are my 3 easy tricks. So whether you're having a full-blown anxiety attack or you're just getting really anxious, like I used to have a lot of anxiety in traffic. So if you're somebody who has to drive and you get stuck in traffic in the morning, having these tools ready is really useful. So let's dive into breath work. So I'm going to return sharing to my video. Cool. So we're going to talk about some different breathing techniques that's going to help you to kind of calm the body down. And this would be my biggest suggestion with an anxiety attack. Anything that you can do to get back into the physical body, because an anxiety attack is kind of purely brain focused, but it's causing a physical reaction with the breath. So if you can use any of these breathing techniques while you're having an anxiety attack, amazing. If not, we're going to talk about a couple other things that you can do. I've got 3 kind of basic breathing techniques. I've got tons more on my website if you want to explore, but the 3 I want you to know today, one is just super easy belly's breath or yogi's breath. So just placing the hands on the belly, if you're at home and you want to do this with me, hands on the belly here. And as we take a big breath in, we let the belly fully expand outwards. And then as we breathe out, we pull the belly button up into the spine. So just keep doing that. See if you can slowly make each breath longer than the other, moving with the belly. So oftentimes when we're dealing with stress and anxiety, we slowly over time start to tense our stomachs. And so we stop using our diaphragm. So we're not using our full lung capacity. That's what we're doing here with this breath. You can add to it a little bit if you're used to yogi's breath by creating the sound, by making this noise through your throat, keeping the mouth closed. We kind of do this by like contracting the back of your throat and kind of feels like you're breathing in and out of a straw through your throat, but you can totally skip that and just focus on the stomach moving. We're just trying to focus on bringing it back into the body, slowing it down, taking at least 6 long, slow breaths. So we need at least 6 breaths to trigger a reaction in the body to engage what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which activates that like rest and relax and digest part of the body, whereas the sympathetic is that anxiety, fear-based. So when we're able to take at least 6 long, deep breaths, using the belly, maybe trying to make the exhale longer than the inhale, we're able to really just allow that parasympathetic to engage and everything starts to calm down naturally. The muscles even start to release, which is why it's so useful in yoga. The other breathing practice I do, oftentimes with my patients who are kind of dealing with anxiety, especially like at work, and they're trying to focus and they don't really have the time to like go dance things off in a bathroom or whatever, and they need to like get back to work right now. Square breathing or box breathing is really useful for clear focus. So the reason it's called square breathing or box breathing is because we make the pattern of a square with our breath. So it's really easy to remember. You can do as many counts of the breath as you'd like. I usually suggest 4, but depending on your lung capacity, you can make it shorter or longer. So we breathe in for the 4 counts, then we hold for the 4 counts, then we breathe out for the 4 counts, and then we hold for the 4 counts. So super simple here. This works for the majority of my clients that I work with. However, I will let you know that every now and again, I get a patient who gets super triggered by holding the breath. It starts to cause more anxiety. And so if that's you, if that ends up causing you a little bit more stress, just skip that. Don't do that breath. Do the belly breathing that we were doing before, or another breath that I really like to encourage people to do is it's super simple. You breathe in, let the shoulders come up by the ears, make everything really tight and awkward, make weird faces, and then exhale, let it go. Like allow everything to drop and be really heavy when you let go. And we just do that 6 times. So just releasing there. So again, the square breathing, super simple, same counts, breathing in, holding, breathing out, and holding. And if you guys go to my blog, the remoteyogi.blog, and search for breath, you can find videos to practice all these with me at home, so you don't have to memorize them right now. All right, let's get back in this. Any questions so far? Please let me know. I'm keeping an eye out on my phone over here. Great, so we went through all the different breathing techniques, and again, the breath is one of the biggest things we can do to engage the parasympathetic, calm back down. But the other thing is movement. So when we get up in our head, which is the cause of stress and anxiety, it's caused by thoughts, we can release it through the physical reaction, right? So it's caused by thoughts that end up triggering things in the body. And so we can shake it off literally. So some of the things that I do, I'm going to stop sharing screen again. Some of the things that I do is literally just get up and start shaking my body completely. I like shake everything. The hands are going, the legs are going. I'm like jumping up and down, just getting everything woken up, because when we're dealing with the stress and anxiety, not only is everything really tight, but we're also kind of storing that stress in the muscles. Like everything kind of clenches. We're holding that emotion in the body. When we start to shake it off, we're literally shaking it out of the muscles. So we're waking them back up. We're kind of finding some more movement. So you'll often see me even in yoga, just kind of shaking things off with my students. It's another thing I, of course, I'm going to suggest to you as a yoga teacher is trying yoga. The only reason I think that it's just kind of elevated to any other kind of fitness, which I also think is just as effective for getting physical with the body, is that the yoga is going to not only do the physical movement, but we're also combining the breath practice that we talked about before. So by doing yoga, you're able to move the body, which is getting back into the physical, and you're able to focus on the breath, which again is engaging that parasympathetic as you move. But I'm also a big fan of the gym. I love lifting weights. I know a lot of my clients love running or dancing. I'm a big fan of putting your playlist on shuffle, and whatever songs come up, dance it off. I do like a 3 shuffle minimum when I'm feeling really stressed out, and I let my body just kind of move to the music, especially if I'm home alone and I don't have to be worried about being goofy. And just allowing me to get out of my head and into my body is one of the quickest things for me to stop that anxiety. So, Ashley, I would say that's my biggest advice for you. If you're dealing with panic attacks and you're not able to get yourself to slow down and breathe, get yourself to get physical, whether even just like pounding your feet into the floor, you're like literally like tapping the body, just like quick smacks on the body, swaying the arms around. Try to get physical, because it's going to start to like backtrack and get back into our physical state and out of our heads a little bit more. So I hope those are useful. Of course, I've got way more to share. Let's see here, going back to screen share. Okay, awesome. So yeah, working out, dancing, shaking it off, literally shaking off. Even if you have to like go to the bathroom at work and stand in a stall and like do your goofy thing, do it. And then laughing it off, you guys, whether you're actually laughing at the anxiety itself, which is what I do, or you're just searching like silly kitty videos on the internet, like whatever it is, get yourself to laugh because we're going to again trigger like the calming in the body. I will sometimes call my friend and walk through the anxiety spiral I'm having. So, for example, I just to give you like a piece of my world, I've been working with stress and anxiety for years, and here I am still having these silly attacks. So, I'm doing something the other day out of kindness for my boyfriend, was trying to find him a solo weekend. So I was looking into Airbnbs and I was going to surprise him so he could go off and do some writing that he needed to do. And I'm on there, I'm looking at all the Airbnbs. Remember, we talked earlier about having way too many options. So suddenly there's way too many options, and I keep trying to narrow things down with new searches, and I'm doing all these things, and there's still like 100 homes to choose from. And so I start thinking, okay, like let's make sure it's got the coolest pool, and like let's make sure he's got access to the beach or whatever it is. I'm like going through all these things. And then my brain's like, well, what if he doesn't want a pool? Well, what if he doesn't want access to the beach? Do you not know your boyfriend well enough to know if he wants these things? What would your boyfriend prefer? What would his favorite Airbnb be? If you don't know this, you're a terrible girlfriend. Why are you even dating this guy? You clearly don't know him well enough to pick him an Airbnb, and you've been dating for 2 years. What is wrong with you? You're a terrible girlfriend. You're the worst girlfriend in the world. Blah, blah, blah. And I am down this shame spiral of anxiety really quick, really fast, right? So one of the things that I can do is I can call my best friend Joe and be like, hey, Joe, let me walk through this crazy with you. And as I'm saying that out loud, he's helping me laugh it off because he knows me well enough to know that this is a thing that we do. So as I'm saying, like, I'm a terrible girlfriend because I can't pick the right Airbnb, like, that's so ludicrous. It's so silly once you say it out loud to somebody else, and it just allows us to laugh it off. It's about releasing the perfectionism. Perfectionism is like my number one thing in my life that constantly comes up that I have to beat back down with a stick. Like, you stay there. It's just one of those things that really keeps you from being authentic, and it's like the biggest trigger for anxiety and stress. So any work you can do to start releasing that perfectionism, and also question the brain. Like when the brain's running off on these tangents, question it. Sometimes I'll either write it all down or I will talk with myself out loud and be like, hey, hang on, hold up. Why is it that you think you're a bad girlfriend in this situation? You're trying to do something nice. Can you give me a better answer here? And questioning the brain makes things a lot smoother here. We're able to kind of like, okay, this is ludicrous, actually. Like, let's move on. Awesome. And that comes back to voicing it. So I am a huge, huge, huge fan of brain dumping in a journal. That is the biggest work that I do with my clients is at the end of every session, they've got plenty of journaling to go do before the next one. And journaling's one of the things that I started to implement in my life a couple years back that has just made significant improvement in my productivity and my personal development and my self-growth. And for those of you who are struggling with that perfectionism, for that like constant need to want to be better, having a journal has been really helpful for me in that regard because sometimes I feel like I haven't really grown much. And so I'll go back and look maybe at last year's journal entry and see the things that were bothering me then. And I'm like, okay, girl, you've got this figured out. You're good. You know, it just kind of helps you to see things in a different perspective and be able to move forward. So journaling is huge. If you don't have a journal already, I highly, highly suggest it. Even if you just write in there every day, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to be writing in here. I'm just going to keep writing, even though I don't know what I'm doing. Like eventually things will start to flood out, or you can hit me up and I'll help you find some great journal prompts. But voicing things, whether written down or even better out loud, is going to help you to release the way that anxiety, fear, and stress have this grip over you, right? Because when it's all in your head and only in your head, it feels really powerful and like it's going to take you down. But as soon as we voice things out loud, you guys, for the most part, it starts to dissipate and it starts to calm down. Um, this is another awesome study that I read about where they had a bunch of research students looking at a screen that had different people's faces on it, and they all had just some kind of different emotion. So maybe it was an angry face or an aggressive face or a happy face or whatever the faces were. And anytime like a negative face was shown, the amygdala was triggered. It was like, oh gosh, this is scary because there's some kind of angry person on the screen, right? So they did that. Everyone's amygdalas were triggered the same way. And then they had a different pair of students or a different set of students go through, and they would see the face and then they'd have to say the emotion out loud. So they would see the angry face and they'd have to say anger. And as soon as they were able to voice the emotion, the amygdala calmed down a little bit. So actually being able to voice the experience, being able to say, hey, here's what's going on, it's going to calm the amygdala down, give it less power, less hold over you. So if you don't have trusted friends or family that you can go to when you're just feeling stressed and anxious, try finding a therapist or a coach like me, or in any kind of realm that you're in. Find people that you can talk to, because especially with anxiety, stress can be a little bit more surface level, but with the anxiety, you're usually dealing with something that's much deeper than what you would think. So we talked earlier about like the false beliefs and the traumas from our past. It can be something as simple as like someone on the playground made fun of you for not being smart enough, and like for the rest of your life you feel like you're not smart enough. And this is something that we have to like figure out and break down. So if you're dealing with this a lot, I'd highly suggest a coach or a therapist. But you can also talk to yourself. I talk to myself a lot, guys. No shame here. Like, I talk to myself all the time just so I can kind of voice through what's going on in my brain. And if you have a journal, you decide to start journaling, one of the biggest things for helping me dig to the root of the issue is I ask why a lot. So I'll say, I'm feeling really anxious about uh, choosing peanut butter today. Why? Because I'm worried that if I don't bring home the right kind, it's going to make me fat. Why? Because I'm worried that if I put on weight, I'm not going to fit in. Why? Because blah, blah, blah. I'm able to keep going down and down and down these rabbit holes. So just keep asking yourself why until you can't go any further. You're just like, just because. There's like no more why. And that's usually a deeper root that you can do some work on. And this takes time, y'all. Like, has taken me years. So don't feel like you need to figure this out tomorrow. And of course, I'm going to tell you to meditate. This is huge. Meditation is really one of the best things that you can do for stress and anxiety, because typically we're slowing down the breath when we're meditating. We're calming the brain because we're focusing on something present. And it doesn't have to be like sitting down and doing nothing. Although, if you want to do that, there's some great ideas on here. You can just follow your breath. Honestly, just counting your breath in and out is a great way to meditate. You can do what my boyfriend does. He counts to 10 over and over and over again in his head. And when he notices he's gone past 10, he realizes he's been thinking. So then he just brings it back and he starts counting over and over and over again to 10. Super easy. You can listen to guided meditations. I've got a bunch I can send your way. You can do like a body scan where you start at the top of the head and try to relax your body, working your way down. But you can also do a lot of active meditation. So whether that's going on a slow walk, whether that's doodling. I love coloring. Coloring helps me to really feel like I'm out of my head and into like some kind of flow state. Um, Doing any kind of creative practice, again, dancing, yoga, whatever, anything that's kind of got you focused on the present moment. For me, that's why yoga was such a triumphant thing in my life, because I actually stumbled into a yoga class. I did not mean to be there. I thought it was a fitness class. And I figured I'm already there. I'm not going to leave because that's awkward. And I stuck it out the whole class. And I was making fun of it the whole time, and I thought it was really goofy. But at the end of the class, I realized I hadn't thought about anything other than how silly the yoga was for the whole hour I was there. And if you're listening to this and you have anxiety, you know how rare it is to think about just one thing for a whole hour. So that really blew my mind. And I was like, okay, from now on, I'm going to take this whole meditation and yoga thing more seriously. Although, to be honest, it took me a few years to like actually implement these things. But hopefully, you can hop on the bandwagon a little quicker than I did. I was a little stubborn. And then the last thing here is tapping. So this can seem a little bit more woo-woo, but it's been really helpful for me, especially dealing with like I had a lot of anxiety around finances, and this kind of just helped me work my way through it. So tapping is also called emotional freedom technique, and it was designed by some therapists. That's like a practice of acupressure with neuroscience. Um, and I will just say here that there hasn't been any scientific testing done that proves that tapping works. I've just seen it work in myself, in my patients, in other people that I've seen go through tapping. And pretty much what it is you're tapping on different points of the body that are called energy meridians. And when we think of something fear based, so if my problem was finances, if I think of the word finances, it used to trigger my amygdala just a little bit. It caused me to be a little anxious, right? So I'd say the word finances and then tapping along these energy meridians as I'm saying the word finances, or I'm scared about finances, whatever it is, as I'm tapping on these points, tapping on those meridians are sending a trigger to my amygdala that's saying, okay, let's calm down actually. So what ends up happening is over time, we're able to develop these positive patterns of when I think of finances, my amygdala is not being triggered anymore. It's actually being calmed down because we start to train ourselves to do something different. So this sounds really silly, but if you're looking for like the next step solution, or you want to talk about like going beyond, if you've tried yoga, you've tried meditation, you tried breathing, all those things didn't work for you, I really suggest tapping. You can do the tappingsolution.com for a lot of videos, or connect with me. Let me know if you want some more information on that. Last but not least is to be with people. So a lot of us end up becoming a little bit of a loner when we're dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety, mostly because we feel like we don't relate to people because we've got this crazy in our head. But being around people we enjoy has been proven to really boost our serotonin, which is like the happy hormones, and decreases cortisol. So be around people that you love. Um, for any of you who travel with work, or even if you're just in a place where you don't really know that many people, go to events that are related to your hobby. So if you really love painting, go to a painting class. You know, if you're into fitness and like doing it by yourself, maybe go to a class, just start meeting new people that are into the same things you are. Schedule phone dates with people who are like living far away from you. Make sure you're keeping up with your friends. It's been proven that like having a phone conversation with somebody that you really care for and appreciate can be just as joyful as being with them in person, when you've got that deeper connection. But you can also get involved in online communities. If you're really just not feeling the vibes of the people around you, of course, I've got an online community membership, but there's lots of them. You can find some Facebook groups that just help you stay motivated and have people coming together and sharing a lot of tips and that sort of thing. And of course, we're going to throw in some Wayne Dyer, who is one of my favorite teachers, along with Gabby Bernstein. She's like my main girl. He says you can't always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on inside. And that sounds like it's not true, but that's just our anxious diva brain telling us otherwise, right? So I'll tell you here, one of the biggest things that I did for feeling like I had more control over my own anxiety was I decided my anxious part of my brain was not me. I gave it a name, and it wasn't part of me. I always tell my anxious clients that The anxiety part of the brain is like an old part of your brain that's like living in the Stone Ages, and it's separate from your higher self, right? It's separate from like who you are deep down. So a lot of the times we feel like we have our identity caught up in the crazy thoughts of our anxiety, and that's not true. So when you're able to name this different part of your brain, I just named mine the diva. Like my diva is going rampant again, and I'm able to separate myself from it and say, hey, I don't have a problem. There's no problem with me. I've got this like annoying roommate in my head that like has something to say about everything that no one wants to listen to, but she's still here blabbering on. I kind of have that attitude now where I've just got this roommate stuck in my head who like won't shut up. But it's not me. And so I can release the power she has over me by saying like, thanks, but no thanks. I don't really need you here right now. Move on, right? So before we close out here, are there any other questions for me? And Ashley, I just thought of something else as far as the panic attacks go. Sometimes when I'm like way too in my head, I just like force myself to like start walking around or even go on a walk. Like if I'm just not feeling the shaking, if I'm not feeling the breathing, if I'm not feeling like calling a friend, I force myself to go on a walk. Or I really enjoy a long shower and I visualize the water like washing away the crazy. um, And if you can get yourself to a point where like you can cry, honestly, crying is going to release the cortisol the fastest because our tears have cortisol in it and it just like allows everything to flood out of you. So either I allow myself to cry like in the shower and it feels really nice, or through laughing, I get myself to the point where I'm like laughing so hard that I'm crying because then it's like a double whammy and it feels really good. Oh my gosh, Ashley, driving is my number one. Like this is why I try not to drive anymore. Like now that I live around the world, I travel full time. I only have a bicycle for the most part. Sometimes I'll have a scooter, but yeah, that's helped me a lot actually not having to drive because it's bad. But sometimes like if I'm in a foreign country and I'm driving on the wrong side of the road and everything else, it comes right back. And sometimes I literally have to pull over, get out, breathe, walk around, and get back in the car and try again. So I was just in England this winter, and the tiny roads were not doing well for me. I did not like that at all. Um, awesome. Just going to share my screen with you guys one more time. Uh, there we go. Okay, so that's how to get a hold of me. The remoteyogi.blogs, where you can find weekly blog posts at the remote yogi on any social media. I'm actually going to go live on Instagram here in about 10 minutes, maybe less than that, and do more question and answers on there. So if you guys want to join me on Instagram, please do. I'm also going to try to get with Courtney from Changemakers and see if she can send out I do usually a resource PDF with this that comes with some of my free yogas and meditations you guys can do at home, and some of my blog posts that I think are the most relevant. So I will get with her, see if we can get that sent over to everyone who signed up for the replay. And if you guys have any other questions, please reach out to me. Again, you can find me on any social media. Reach out. I'd love to connect with you guys. And I'll stop sharing so you can see my face for one more second. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's like nighttime here, and I'm in Thailand, and just gonna go do that live on Instagram, and hopefully head to bed soon. So you guys have a wonderful day, whatever time it is where you are, and please connect. If you had any other questions about this, I'd love to be able to support you. Thank you so much, everyone.